From One of One Production Studios, broadcasting from NYC, you are listening to Unexpected Success with your host, Joy.
Welcome back to another episode of Unexpected Success with me, your host, Joy. It's been a minute. Had to get through all that back to school and moving offices and things. So it's been a little bit rough, but here we are. And I'm so happy to have in the studio today, Alyssa Petersel. Alyssa, hi.
Hi.
Hi. Alyssa is the CEO and founder of My WellBeing, a platform that brings matchmaking to mental therapy, which is genius, by the way.
Thank you.
Alyssa is also a writer of an editor of books. She has 2 books that I saw. Somehow I Am Different, and also Narratives and Belonging in Jewish Budapest.
Same book.
Oh, same book. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I'll take it.
Okay, cool. All right. Great. I can't wait to get into that. That sounds super interesting. And Alyssa and My WellBeing was also featured in Forbes magazine just last month. And great highlight there. And I literally have the article up here right now. So happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So how did you even come up with this? This is amazing. I mean, obviously matchmaking has been around for quite some time, but how did you come to think of matchmaking as it pertains to like finding a therapist?
So I'm actually trained as a social worker myself. And when I went about that training, when I went to get my master's in social work, which was after writing the book and working a little bit in publishing, I realized how hard the search was for myself, despite knowing a lot about the industry and having a general sense of what I was looking for. And then throughout my training, because usually when you experience an obstacle, at first it seems like it might just be you.
Right. No, everyone thinks it's just that because no one talks about it.
Exactly.
Right.
So then it took, in my training, I was helping, tens or hundreds of other people find a therapist through some of what's called a field placement when you're getting your master's, which is essentially part-time work or an internship in conjunction with class. And I realized quite how many people were having a really hard time finding the right therapist.
Right. No, it's so hard.
It's so hard.
I've been there like several times. So yeah.
I asked other colleagues of mine and professors of mine at the time on the therapist side if it was also hard for them to connect with clients that they really resonated with.
Right.
And they confirmed that was also hard on the other side.
Now that's interesting because you would think that therapists could speak to almost everyone. I mean, I guess they can, right?
Yeah.
But can they penetrate?
And you know what? I think there is a lot of chemistry and rapport in the work that we don't really give it credit in the same way, where you go on a date and someone might be perfect on paper, but there just isn't really that level of understanding or connection.
Right, of course.
That really applies in therapy too. So even if the therapist...
I've never thought of it like that.
Yeah. So even if the therapist is, technically qualified to work with everyone, and a lot of times they can, they're pretty malleable.
Right.
Particularly a high quality therapist can be really versatile. But there are certain people for chemistry reasons that you click with more, and that clicking and level of understanding beneath the surface is really important.
So this is fast. So I have had several therapists, total transparency, right? And I had one, I'm very emotional. So I'm like, I can get angry, cry, and she was super cold. She'd watch you cry and just and wait till the fit was over. Wouldn't even offer tissue. You see on I don't know, what was that? What was that on HBO with
In
Tony
Therapy?
Soprano? Yeah. I'm dating myself, but Sopranos, right? Yeah. I was like with Tony Soprano. But yeah, no, wouldn't pass the tissue. Would just kind of like, oh, are you done? And I hated her, but she was helpful to me. I think maybe I needed that kind of coldness to kind of get me out of my fit, but I would have gladly had someone else. So this is fascinating because maybe she thought I was too emotional for her, right? And you don't think about that from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, too, because a lot of therapists have different techniques and styles and training.
Right.
That I think one of the most common misconceptions about therapy is that there is one blanket kind, and it looks the same in the room so every therapist won't offer you a tissue.
Right.
Whereas there are therapists who practice different levels of self-disclosure. So some people will be a lot more open about their own background. Other people will be very closed off about any kind of personal question.
Right.
And there's different levels of nurturing, too. So there's different, if someone is crying or really angry, there's different degrees of neutrality in the response, which is pretty interesting. Yeah.
No, I find this fascinating. But before we get way gone, right? So clearly we know you're trained, and you clearly you saw a need in the marketplace, and you're filling it. Which obviously is remarkable. But tell us more about you, right? So how did you know that you could do this, right? Where are you from?
I grew up in Long Island.
Okay, where about?
In Suffolk County, in Melville.
Oh, in Melville. Okay, all right. And siblings, what was your life?
2 older brothers.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where to start.
Okay, all right. Let me help you out there. Okay, so very kind of normal household upbringing. Are your parents entrepreneurs?
They're not. I had a pretty cookie cutter as far as the suburbs go upbringing. My dad was a physician. He was a doctor.
Okay.
My mom was a lawyer.
Okay.
So went to public school, learned, math, science, English. I didn't know entrepreneurship was a thing until...
You didn't? Okay. Did your parents have
later.
any friends or anyone that was doing anything that was kind of innovative?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think from a really young age, they were definitely both of their mantras, I think, was that they really wanted for my brothers and I to be able to do whatever it was that we wanted to do.
Okay.
And I think...
Which is huge.
It's huge.
To have that kind of freedom.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And I think it's twofold. I think on the one hand, it's incredibly empowering and you can let your imagination run wild. What do you really want to do? And on the other, I know for me, I was generally a pretty type A perfectionist personality, and I found that freedom for a really long time to be kind of paralyzing. Because you have so many options.
Right. It's limitless.
That how do you know what to choose?
Down?
How do you know what are you good at? What are you not good at? What should you not do? So
how did you figure out your passion, and then B, how to apply the passion, right?
Yeah. For me, there's a lot of trial and error. I actually went to undergrad. In high school, I liked maths and sciences, and in undergrad, I started as an engineer.
Okay.
I wanted to make fake limbs for trauma victims.
Wow.
Which was really specific.
Listen, you go all the way.
But I didn't like it, so I got to school.
Okay.
I went to a private undergraduate. I went to Northwestern University, and right when I arrived, I actually faced a lot of overwhelm, because I was coming from a place where I didn't feel like my educational background was quite as strong as who then I was surrounded by. Right. So I found myself in all these, advanced math and science classes, and I really didn't like it. So then I hit a crossroads of, okay, what really resonates with me? And I gravitated more toward working with people.
Right.
And I switched into psychology. And at that point, I started studying things like meditation, and I started learning a lot more about how the mind works and how different people interact, and that resonated way more. So,
and in building an app, obviously you're still able to, utilize some of your math and science. I'm not sure if you get involved with the coding at all, but you have an idea of what you want it to look and feel like. So you're mixing engagement, with
which I think is a good reminder for a lot of people who maybe don't know what they want to do. Is it feels like, I know for me, it felt like in undergrad you have to choose this one thing that has to be your everything.
Absolutely. No, that was my life. I get it. Yeah.
And now I find myself, I guess, like at least 5 years, 10, however many years post, having those internal conflicts with myself and realizing that different parts of my story really have fed this new professional chapter in a lot of different ways.
Right.
But I would have never known that at the time. So I didn't know that engineering background had relevance. I didn't know that, there was such a thing where you could wear 10 hats at the same time.
Right. So it's interesting because it just shows that like nothing's kind of by accident, right? You went through what you went through so that you can get to where you are now.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is great for the audience, right? The biggest thing here is I want people to realize A, it's never too late. Mm-hmm. B, just because you don't have it figured out today doesn't mean that you can't figure it out, right? Exactly. And whatever you're doing today could literally lead you exactly where you need to be, right? So all of these things. All right, so you're in Long Island, pretty, normal life in the suburbs. You go to college, you have this experience with going to Northwestern, then you become a psychology major. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then what?
So then my first couple of years out of school, I actually think a bigger pivotal point was psychology major. I then went to India for about half a year while a student. Okay. To really dive deeper into meditation and Buddhist philosophy. And that was a really big turning point in terms of how I philosophized about things and how I thought about meaning making and friendship. And then returned to school, got my first job, which was in community organizing in Chicago. Okay. I worked. You in Obama, right? Yeah, exactly. I did a lot of violence prevention work with.
That's now what? Now, okay. I'm scared to go to Chicago. And I have great friends in Chicago. Hi, friends in Chicago. But I have great friends in Chicago. But like, when you see what's on the news, and you're like, what is going on in Chicago? Yeah. So I know your parents. How did your parents feel about you going to Chicago to do community organization?
My parents, I think, have historically been pretty confused by most of my life choices. But they've come around the bed. They're acquainted that things will be fine, and they just sort of nod and accept that it's going to happen.
This is what it's going to happen, right? And your brothers, so did they take are they entrepreneurs as well, or?
They're pretty entrepreneurial. They have. We all have our different sort of niches of things that really light us up. My oldest brother is really involved in the music space. Okay. He, after his undergrad, or during undergrad and a few years after, started and ran his own music magazine for a couple of years.
Oh, wow. How cool is that?
And he's now working at Spotify.
Oh, so cool.
He's in the entrepreneurship space.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And my middle brother is more involved in sports. Okay. So he does a lot of freelance writing, and he works at Bleacher Report, which is also very entrepreneurial.
I love it. Yeah. I love, you have a kick-ass family, dude. Your parents must be really proud. Yeah. No, it's pretty cool.
I think they are, yeah. But, no one's perfect. We have our stuff, too.
Well, I mean, everybody does. Yeah. You open the door, you're like, oh, wait.
Exactly, exactly. I mean? Yeah. But it's always worth noting, things, they can look peachy keen on the out. And I adore my family. But I always in the health and wellness space, I always like to note, it's good to maintain perspective. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Right, we'll just leave that right there. We'll leave that right there. Now, okay, so all right. So you, so the app. Yeah. How did this? I know how it came about, but how did you end up really realizing that you wanted to piece it together like this? Like, how did you realize it was a matchmaking?
Yeah. If I'm honest, the original seed was planted because I wanted to use it myself, and I couldn't find it elsewhere.
Wow.
So I thought,
that's huge.
Yeah, and I had the advantage of having that backing, of having the experience on the social working side to realize that I thought other people could really benefit too. Right. And I think for people out there who have their own idea, the first step is to run a small test and just start asking people, would they use this thing? And if you get enough, it's as simple as that. Granted, until you build something XYZ, if people really like it, ask a bunch of strangers, because if they're your friends, they're probably going to say yes.
Right, of course, of course.
Ask them too.
Of course I'd use it. Alyssa, I love you.
But that's a good place to start. And they say, okay, 20 people will use it. Great. And then build the thing that's the smallest, cheapest, easiest thing to build. That takes a couple hours of your time. It's not a huge loss if that's the only thing it is. If it's just a weekend project, you build a thing. and then see if people use it and see if it's helpful. And for me, that's been huge, that each step of the way has essentially been a slightly more advanced version of that.
Right, so you kind of have a beta version, right? And you kind of like keep on adding new features. And I'm on this site now. I'm just taking a look at it. Great feel.
Thank you.
Great user interface. Great, I love it. Now, is this subscription based, or how do you?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's subscription based on our clinician side. So it's completely free for people who want a therapist to find their therapist.
Okay.
And then they continue to pay their therapist as they would otherwise. So we work with really diverse therapists and how much they charge, what their background is, race, ethnicity, gender, part of the city. We are focused in Manhattan and Brooklyn right now.
Okay.
So that being said, on average, a private practice therapy session in New York City can cost $250.
Right.
Our average is more like $175.
Oh, okay.
And we do work with clinicians who can give a sliding scale, which you'll see on so many therapist websites. What that actually means is that they can accommodate a lower fee.
Right.
They just generally want to talk to you about it. So they want to know, where are you coming from? What's your perspective? What can you manage? And they're very open to having that conversation with you. So we help people connect with someone whose range they can afford.
Right.
And then we really encourage people to have that conversation with the clinician, which for some people it can definitely be intimidating. So we offer ourselves as coaches as well to walk through, like, what might you want to ask? And just, I like to think of that conversation as jumping off the pool, diving board.
Right.
It's like, you feel a little like shaky in the knees, and it's not so comfortable, like when you're about to jump off the diving board, but then you get in the pool and you're swimming,
you're fine.
And it's
fine. It's like, why was I even scared? And I can't believe it. Why'd I flinch? Right. All right. And so I guess, what's the overall goal? Like, what's your goal with My WellBeing? Is this it for you, or is this kind of like, again, like a springboard for you to do something else bigger? Like, what is your?
I think My WellBeing is going to be, I'm with it for the long haul. I think the matchmaking is going to be one thing of various things that we do. So ideally, helping people get into the room is step one.
Right.
And ultimately, we really want to be a guide in helping people also enjoy and make the most out of their therapy. So things like, how do you know if it's working? Things like tracking over time, like what changes are you experiencing in your mood? So you're digging deeper. It's bigger than just the matchmaking. It's also then, how was this experience for you, right?
Yeah.
And how can it be better?
Awesome. Okay. I guess, what words of advice would you give someone? I mean, you've already given some pretty great advice, just in terms of, asking, just seeing what you need and seeing if people use it, right? But what advice would you give someone who is thinking about an idea, or is sitting on a couch and they're like, I don't know, playing this new video game that everyone's playing now, like, and not pursuing dreams? What advice would you give them?
I would say, if somebody has that dream, they have the idea, even if they don't, they know that they want to do this thing. I truly think it's really important to work in the tiniest, most piecemeal steps that you can. That to not do that thing is as ridiculous as to do it, if not more. So
right.
I'm talking like, you tell yourself on Wednesday before work, you're going to wake up 20 minutes early and sit with your breakfast and write down a bulleted list of brainstorm free association ideas. If you don't have an idea, what do you want to do? What are things that would make your life easier? And literally putting that time into your calendar. I live by my calendar. So if someone does not, putting a Post-it on the fridge. If you live by your coffee maker, putting a Post-it,
or by your wine, right?
Or by your wine, right? Wherever you know that you're going to be and you're going to be checking and you're going to get that reminder, that's where you put that reminder.
I love that. And in terms of transferable skills, I often try to talk about, even you were able to utilize your engineering and math science skills and create and kind of like repurpose it to what you're doing now. I think people who are currently stuck in a 9-to-5, right, trying to find hours, like you said, before work, after work, to figure out what else you would prefer doing, right, where you can find your transferable skills. Now, are there any books that you read to try to figure out who you are? Because I listened to a book called What Is Your What? And I forget.
So good. Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And
so it's Simon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, it's just a lot of times people don't spend enough time thinking about who they are and what they like to do.
Yeah.
And what brings them excitement, right? So did you have to, I guess, how did you filter down?
Yeah. I'm a little biased, but I'm going to say go to therapy.
Right.
Because that is 45 minutes to an hour a week where you are figuring out who you are, whether it's related to career, relationships. You are digging. You might think you know who you are, and then you have those questions that keep circulating. That's really the devoted time where you're going to dig. But in terms of books, I'll also say there's a book called Getting There that for me was really motivating.
Okay.
Which is essentially an anthology, so each chapter is a different person's story, and it's all entrepreneurs who've been really successful. Okay. And it's them sharing how it is they do what they do and what they do. And it's all different industries. And you get a glimpse into the life of entrepreneurship, because I think also it's very easy to glamorize self-employment and entrepreneurship, but it's really hard too. So this book is really good about showing the good sides 100%, but also showing, these people generally go through a couple years of really grueling, waking up at 4 a.m. to make the deliveries in this huge U-Haul, whatever it is.
Right. Did you ever experience any self-doubt?
Oh, yeah. Still, I think, certainly for me, I imagine for many others, the entrepreneurial journey is a minute-by-minute or hour-by-hour oscillation of self-doubt and self-loyalty. Like,
right. Trying to pump yourself up.
Loving everything that's happening or hating everything that's happening and wondering whether you should still be in the 9-to-5. Like,
right. Should I go to job?
Yeah.
Because your parents are like, you need your benefits. What are you doing?
And for real, when it comes time to renew the health insurance, you're like,
I know.
So about,
Right. No, exactly. So you have a staff?
Yeah, small staff, and I'm the only full-time human. Okay. So we have a bunch of part-time warriors, essentially. They're really talented.
Right.
And they're all very specialized, which I'd also recommend. Like young companies, I think that's extremely helpful to find your support team that is the best at what they do.
Okay, it's great advice, by the way. I'm like taking notes.
Yeah. So granted, you have to be mindful, like what's your budget? It's a little bit more nuanced, because the person who's actually probably number one in New York City at Google Ads is not going to be in the budget of
of course,
of a 6-month-old.
Of course, right.
But there are, I use Upwork. It's a great freelance marketplace, and there's people on there with years, if not decades, of experience who have really competitive rates, and that's been really helpful. And to be true to your gut reactions of someone has to be good at what they do, but they have to be a good fit for the company as well.
Right.
And the
personality. Culture is huge, right? All right. So let's jump into this your book.
Yeah.
So Somehow I Am Different, Narratives and Belonging in Jewish Budapest. Now, how did that come about?
That's even more of a mysterious journey than my well-being. So my senior year of undergrad, I found myself in Budapest with a Jewish group on campus. I come from a Jewish background.
Okay.
And it was a 10-day volunteer trip. And this is actually also kind of related to my experience in Chicago and what we were saying about the fear of going there. I have this universal experience that the news tends to paint everything as doom, what it's called, like if it bleeds, it leads, is the journalistic motto.
Right.
Meanwhile, you actually go to a place in person and it's beautiful, and there are people who are doing incredible things, they're creative, they're changing the scene. So that was exactly my experience in Budapest, where I went, and leading up to the trip, I was pretty fearful of
course, yeah.
The economy wasn't great. It was pretty anti-Semitic. It was not so many tourists. So I went assuming that things would be pretty gloomy. And I had this unique opportunity to interact with all of these amazing young entrepreneurs who were creating a new identity for their Jewish community despite Budapest being hit really hard by the Holocaust.
Right.
That was just 1 or 2 generations before them. So immediately, something just resonated. I found that so powerful, and I felt really disappointed and bothered that their stories were not known outside of their city. And on a smaller scale they were, but there were no New York Times articles about it. So at that point I really knew that I wanted to go back. And originally I actually wanted to make a documentary film.
Oh.
But in terms of a lot of the things we're talking about with my well-being, I did some introspection about what are my actual skills.
Right.
Film was not one of them.
Right. So you would have to like
I didn't really have experience with
Yeah.
that. So I could start from scratch and learn something new, which I'm not saying don't do if that's really what lights you up 100%.
Right.
But I love writing, and I was really passionate about writing. So I just did a little gut check, and I was like, I actually think I could make a bigger impact with something that I already feel like is a strength of mine.
Right.
Than starting from scratch with something completely new. So at that point, I was working in my first job in Chicago, which relates because I think they have a very similar, the public image of Chicago is very scary.
Right.
And, there is a tremendous amount of violence, and it's a huge problem that deserves attention and needs to be addressed.
Right.
But there is also, there are so many things happening on the ground.
And they're great people, and
exactly.
They're great people. They are doing, like you said, amazing things,
exactly.
right? But that's not televised.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and this is good advice too, if you have an idea. For the book, I actually crowdfunded about $12,000 to fund a year in Hungary.
Oh, wow.
So because the cost of living there is a lot cheaper than in New York, that's really all I needed. And the people who invested in that crowdfunding campaign were essentially the first buyers of the book. So they all got a book on the other side.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
That really supported the year there.
So funding, funding even for My WellBeing.
Yeah.
How did you go about doing it? Because I think a lot of times, I think one of the main reasons people don't step out.
Oh yeah.
Is that they don't have the money to step out, right? So how did you end up finding the money for?
I think funding varies widely by the idea. So I got pretty lucky because My WellBeing in general, there are a lot of softwares that I was able to leverage in the early days that are pretty much free. So my financial burden was more time. Because, a website's about $200.
Right.
Google Sheets are free, like whatever. When you're working at a scale that's super manual, it's really time. If you're building, a new cell phone, that's going to be, you have to fundraise up front, like a tremendous amount of tech expense up front.
Right, of course.
Or a hardware product. But for something that's software, SaaS, marketplace, I think testing that your customers are there is so much more important.
Right.
So I actually started supporting myself in other ways. So I worked as a therapist for about 7 months part-time.
Okay.
To pay for things like rent, groceries, etc. And My WellBeing, I was really doing more of the testing to prove, is this a need for both people looking for a therapist and for therapists?
Right, who need more clients.
Exactly.
Right.
And then once I was able to prove that out, and once, because we're a subscription service supported by the clinician side, once we generated enough clinicians for me to take that step, it was a no-brainer.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And so you haven't had to rely on any kind of funding yet?
No. So so far we have a little bit of angel funding, which means angels are essentially not necessarily institutional investors.
Right.
They're generally relatively wealthy individuals who make intelligent investments. So you still have to show them, that
financials,
exactly.
that their money is working.
Exactly. But they don't necessarily always have the same super high pace, super high intensity expectations that a standard venture capital firm will.
Right.
And the VC firms are going to want you to be a multi-billion-dollar company in 5 years.
Based on how much, exactly. Based on how much they give you. They're like, okay, so how's it looking? How are you looking? Right, exactly.
Which adds a tremendous amount of pressure. So for a lot of companies, it makes so much sense. I don't even know that it doesn't make sense for My WellBeing, but for right now, we are a hugely value-based company. So I've been very hesitant to take on any funding that would put any decision-making at risk of being more bottom-line oriented than value-oriented.
Right, because then you have to get your own therapist, right?
Which I love my
but you have to more, right? Because then you're that much more stressed because you have all these expectations. So right now you are still able to carry on, do well, but you don't harbor the same amount of stress.
And it's such a personal decision. It depends on the product. If you're selling T-shirt or whatever,
right?
For me, there wouldn't be necessarily as many potential ethical questions of this way, that way.
Right.
Sometimes it really is about the bottom line, and then you do that's the only question. But in this particular industry, there's so much at stake in terms of I really want to take care of the people that we're working with to some extent.
Right.
So sometimes you do have to make a call that isn't necessarily only about money. And I don't know yet how well that would drive with,
No.
a 30x return.
No, I mean, it's awesome to have that type of flexibility, right? To feel like, I could go that direction. Not really sure I want to do that yet. If it starts to explode, maybe you might, and also hire someone else to kind of step into your shoes to alleviate your stress, right? But I mean, obviously, you kind of have most of it figured out.
Well,
I mean,
girl can dream, but
within context, sorry, within context. Yeah. I mean, you come to this point. So I don't want to go too long, but I mean, I could totally talk to you for like hours because I've so enjoyed this.
Me too.
And I'm going to sign up with My WellBeing. Yeah. Because I obviously everyone needs a therapist, whether you want to admit it or not. And this is all confidential as well, right? So you can go on. It's mywellbeing.com. That's MYWELLBEING.com. Sign up, right? And get yourself together, right? Figure out how to transfer those skills.
Exactly.
Right. So there are therapists that actually help you hone in on what you're good at, which I think is worth it. Obviously. So anyway, I guess any parting words, Alyssa, for this audience?
I would say take the leap, whether it's therapy, your own company, your own passion project. You just got to try. And there's ways, lower risk, higher risk ways of doing so. But at the end of the day, you got to jump in.
Yeah, you just got to do it.
Yeah. And thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my God. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. All right, great. So I guess that's it. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in to another episode of Unexpected Success with me. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, YouTube, and Podbean. Please hit subscribe and leave a review once you've listened. Until next time, Alyssa, keep winning.
Woo!
All right. Cheers.
This podcast was brought to you by 23DB Productions, ID Productions, and One of One Productions. For more information, go to Facebook and Instagram, Unexpected Success with Joy.